Welcome everyone to The Explainer. So look, if you've ever felt like your bank account is just getting tossed around by these invisible, completely uncontrollable forces, you are absolutely in the right place today. We're going to reframe personal finance. We're not looking at it as a tedious chore. We're looking at it as a giant, high-stakes game. And like literally any game, it has a very specific rulebook. The incredibly wealthy didn't invent some kind of magic, they just learned the rules. So today, we're diving straight into the source material to figure out exactly how this game is played, and more importantly, how you can win.
Okay, here is the game plan for today's crash course. First, the illusion of money. Second, banks, taxes, and you. Third, interest, inflation, and recessions. Fourth, cracking your credit score. And finally, investing and the time hack. Let's get right into it.
Kicking things off with Section 1, the illusion of money, a shared construct.
Before we can even begin to master finance, we really have to grasp this wild concept. Money itself isn't objectively real. Think about it for a second. There is no inherent physical difference between a crumpled-up dollar bill and a random stick you find on the ground, other than our collective societal agreement that the piece of paper actually means something. The entire financial system only functions because everyday people agree to trust this paper, and central banks carefully regulate it behind the scenes. If the government just printed money endlessly, well, inflation would skyrocket, and everyone's cash would literally become monopoly money. It is a super delicate balance built entirely on trust.
Moving on to Section 2, Banks, Taxes, and You, the Cost of Civilization.
Let's look at how this shared trust builds our first major financial realities. Imagine you've had a really hard month, grinding away, flipping burgers at McDonald's. You look at your gross paycheck and see $2,000, but your actual take-home pay is only $1,456. Where did it go? Invisible forces stepped in and took a massive chunk. Now, while it definitely hurts to look at, taxes are essentially the mandatory cost of civilization. They are exactly what fund the roads we drive on, the schools our kids go to, and they ensure the health department keeps your favorite local taco truck from becoming infested with rats.
Basically, the government takes a little cut of every single dollar as it moves around the economy. They tax the money you make, the money you spend at the store, and yes, even the money your investments make while you're fast asleep. Social Security acts kind of like a forced retirement savings plan, and Medicare supports healthcare for the elderly. But honestly, the wildest part about all this? The government actually already knows exactly what you owe them, but they still make you play this high-stakes guessing game when you file every year. If you guess right, great. But if you're wrong, man, you are cooked.
Okay, so once you finally have your post-tax money, you usually drop it in a bank. And you might picture your bank as this scaly dragon guarding a giant steel vault with your specific name on it, right? But the reality is actually called fractional reserve banking. Banks are essentially just matchmakers. When you deposit your cash, they keep a teeny tiny fraction of it in the vault, and they lend the other 90% straight out to someone else who wants to go buy a jet ski. Your money doesn't just sit there gathering dust, it is constantly out there moving.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Knowing your hard-earned cash is out there buying some random guy a jet ski sounds a little terrifying, right? Like, what if everyone wants their money back at the exact same time like we saw in the crazy 2008 crash? Well, the reason your money is vastly safer in a bank than stuffed inside a shoebox under your bed is a very specific number. In the US, the government assures you that your deposits are insured up to $250,000 per person. So you can breathe easy.
Let's level up to Section 3, Interest, Inflation, and Recessions, the Invisible Forces. Having conquered banks and taxes, we are officially entering the territory of macroeconomics. We're going to explore the underlying, totally invisible currents of the economy that can quietly build or completely destroy your wealth over time. First up is interest. Think of interest as money's way of charging rent. Simple interest is just a flat fee, easy enough. But compound interest, that means your money creates clones, and then those clones also start charging rent. This dynamic can literally be your worst enemy or your absolute best friend. For example, a 20% compound interest rate on a missed credit card payment turns a $12 burrito into a $50 regret really fast. But on the flip side, a 7% investment return acts like a cheat code, silently duplicating your cash while you sleep.
Which leads to our next invisible force, inflation. Have you ever opened a bag of chips and realized the price was like 30% higher than last month for what is essentially a half-eaten bag of air? Yeah, that slow, silent erosion of your money's purchasing power is inflation. But what is actually causing that to happen behind the scenes? Well, the main culprits usually come down to high demand and supply issues. Let's use a classic example. If 2,000 people suddenly have cash in hand and all want to buy a $500 TV, but the store only has 1,000 TVs in stock, what happens? The store's obviously going to raise the price to $800. Boom, inflation. It can also be triggered by supply chain hiccups that make things way more expensive to produce. Or, strangely enough, just consumer expectations. If people think prices are going to rise, they panic buy right now, which actually drives the prices up even faster. It's totally a self-fulfilling economic prophecy. Now, a predictable, slow inflation rate of around 2% a year, that's actually entirely normal and super healthy for a growing economy. We want a little bit of it. But when inflation spikes way beyond that, the government has to step in to fix it. And how do they fight it? They raise interest rates. That makes borrowing money a lot more expensive, which means people buy fewer of those TVs and the whole economy slowly cools off.
But sometimes, cooling off the economy goes just a little too far. And that brings us to a recession. This is defined simply as an economy decreasing for at least 6 months. It's basically when the music stops. Whether it's triggered by those high interest rates, a sudden global pandemic, or even a rogue container ship completely blocking a major canal, jobs vanish, companies slash their costs, and everyone just starts hoarding their money for absolute necessities.
But hey, don't panic. Recessions aren't forever. They are just painful but necessary resets in a perfectly natural economic cycle. Think of the economy like a massive house party. In the boom phase, the drinks are flowing, everyone's dancing, having a great time. At the peak, reality sort of hits. During the bust phase, the DJ puts on sad lo-fi beats, the party clears out, and corporate downsizing happens. But eventually, we always reach the reset phase. Businesses rebuild, spending slowly returns, and the growth cycle resumes all over again.
All right, moving to Section 4, cracking your credit score, the trust metric.
Let's decode the shadowy little algorithm that basically decides your adult financial fate. This 3-digit number, it isn't actually about how wealthy you are. You could literally have 0 debt and still have a terrible score. It is strictly a measure of how much a lender trusts you to pay them back. Fall below 580 and lenders look at you like a walking red flag. But if you climb over 750, you are absolutely sparkling with adult credibility, and that unlocks the best interest rates possible for things like cars and houses.
Your score is basically like a pet dog. If you ignore its key needs, it will absolutely make a mess of your life. The biggest factor, by far, is your payment history. But by simply managing these elements, like keeping your credit utilization low, not opening too many new cards all at once, and always paying on time, you can rig this seemingly rigged game entirely in your favor. It's all just about looking incredibly reliable to lenders. And finally, Section 5, investing and the time hack, winning the game. We've reached the final boss level of our explainer. You now know exactly how inflation slowly steals your cash, which means just sitting on it in a checking account is a guaranteed losing game. The only way to stop that theft and actually win is by investing, trading your current money for more money in the future. There are a few main vehicles for this. You can buy stocks, which are just tiny slices of ownership in companies. You can buy bonds, which are basically loans you make to a government or a corporation. There are funds, which conveniently bundle all these together to save you time. Or there's real estate. Now yes, investing involves risk, for sure, because markets always go up and down. But jumping into these vehicles early and keeping your investments broadly diversified is infinitely safer in the long run than letting your cash sit quietly in a bank account, actively losing its purchasing power.
Which brings us to the ultimate secret behind massive wealth, perceived value. I mean, why is gold worth so much? At the end of the day, it's literally just a shiny yellow rock. Why can Gucci sell a handbag for 100 times the price of the exact same functional bag at Target? It's simply because humans perceive it to have higher value. Whether it's an iPhone invented by Steve Jobs or a high-end luxury brand, creating or holding on to things that society perceives as highly valuable is the ultimate mechanism for earning serious amounts of money.
But listen, the absolute greatest force multiplier for that value is time. Almost everyone starts out trading their hours directly for a paycheck, but the wealthy, they've trained their money to do the heavy lifting for them. By combining modest, consistent investments with the absolute cheat code of compound growth, and then just adding 30 years of patience, totally ordinary people can retire with 7 figures. They didn't beat the system, they simply used it over decades. Wealth isn't built in days, you guys, it's built in decades.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer. And it leaves you with a really crucial choice. You now know the rules of the game. You can see the invisible forces at play. So the big question is, are you going to let taxes, inflation, and compound interest passively control your life?
Or are you going to actively apply these cheat codes, rig the game in your favor, and finally make your time and money work for you? The next move is entirely yours. Thanks so much for learning with us today, and I'll catch you in the next one.